Hi, this is Nick Palizzi from The Sacred Science, and we've got a really cool interview for you today. If you've ever been in the woods, you've probably seen or noticed tree mushrooms hanging in the canopy above. I know we sure have. And, for a long time, I just thought they were this kind of a beautiful, ornate decoration that nature gave us. But starting to realize that there's a lot of medicine up there. And, a lot of you might already be tuned into this, but I think today we should really delve into it. So we're joined today by my friend, Tero Isokauppila from Four Sigmatic. It's a really awesome new company that is bringing a lot of medicinal mushrooms to the world. Tero, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You and I spoke about a month ago and, I was like, wait, this is something that we need to record and, give to the community because this is information that's powerful. It's something that people aren't really talking about much yet. I mean, in the world of natural health, there's a lot of other really popular topics. And I think, the idea of medicinal mushrooms is something that's still making its way into the conversation. And there's something really important here that I think needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, even the name medicinal mushrooms indicates the healing powers. So I'm sure you and your audience are pretty into that. So there's a lot to talk about. And for example, as a kind of an intro, about 40% of pharmaceuticals utilize fungi, so these medicinal mushrooms in them. So there's a lot of research behind them, but also a long history of indigenous use. So it's one of those cool things that are time-worn and modern in a way. So
yeah, I was doing a lot of reading over the last couple weeks on mushrooms and how they're used, and there are some really interesting stats, like the idea that there's something like 5 million species of fungi in the world, and something like 1 or 2% of it has been studied. Like it kind of mirrors something that we talk about a lot with the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, how there's 65,000, 70,000 and growing plants that grow in the Amazon, and less than 2 or 3% of them have been studied for their medicinal value. I mean, there seems to be a very big opportunity here, for people to not only delve deeper into their own health, but just to understand a little bit more about the world.
yeah, absolutely. There's about 6 times more different types of fungi in the world than there are plants. Not to say that fungi are better than plants, no means, but it just gives you an idea of the diversity they have. In the same way as in Amazon, we're still discovering plants. There's so many fungi where there's only about 400 right now that are so-called medicinal out of these like millions of mushrooms. So
Yeah.
like an indication that there's an opportunity that we'll find something. But the good news is that we've already discovered amazing things. From penicillin is based on a fungi, but a lot of immune system, cancer, autoimmune type of things, blood sugar related medicines, natural medicines are out there. So it's something that we can already start using, and also keep our fingers crossed that we'll find more.
So I want to delve into some of those big players, like those big mushrooms that just really need to be, put, some time in the spotlight. But first I kind of want to delve into how you got into this. I mean, I've got a pretty interesting story. I feel like a lot of us have these interesting stories about how we actually got into this profession. Like you didn't wake up one day when you were young and say, or maybe you did say, hey, I want to bring medicinal mushrooms to the world. I wonder sometimes when I'm talking to people like you, extraordinary individuals, how you got here. And I know that you come from a pretty long line of farmers in Finland, and I'd love to just talk about that. This is something that's been in your blood for a very long time.
Yeah, maybe the mushrooms chose me, so I didn't choose them. So I'm a 13th generation family farmer out of Finland. Or that's as long as we know. Like there's a time before that we didn't know. So that very Nordic, and part of that practice is we grew up on a kind of an organic farming area. So besides organic farming of, let's say, oats, we also foraged a lot. So it was foraging berries and mushrooms. Finland is, think of it like Maine or Vermont, or maybe the state of Washington a little bit, in the similar ecosystem. So there's a lot of those mushrooms and berries. And I went to an environmental school that my great granddad helped to found, and by accident about 12 years ago found a rare mushroom growing in Finland, and that's another story for another day. But kind of grew up with them, and they were not anything better than, let's say, nettle or rhodiola or other things that were like very healing in our culture, but they were part of it. And then later on, I figured out in my mid-20s, I kind of started realizing that people don't know much about mushrooms. And at that time, I'd already worked with this one mushroom that I discovered, but that was when I kind of figured out that they are underrepresented. So there are many amazing things in natural products and healing that some of them are trendy right now, but I felt that mushrooms were really underrepresented and they needed a PR agency, if you may, and figure out a way how to take them in their original form that will still suit the use case of modern day life, because they're not as easy to use than some other natural products. They require a little bit of a preparation. So just try to figure out a way how you can make it so easy for people to use that they don't have to make any sacrifices and still reap the benefits.
Very cool. So something about what you and your brother, right? Your brother and a group of other people, probably back in Finland, are sort of what comprises the Four Sigmatic team, right? Is that accurate?
No, actually, my brother is running our family farm, which is a different thing, kind of, and he's also has a heavy metal record label and is an environmental engineer. So he has a totally other random thing he does. So, but it is a group of friends. So it was started by a bunch of my friends, my old roommates from college and friends of friends. And so it is, I mean, now we have amazing American employees as well. And we moved the whole business to US. So we're based out of the US, but how we started was a group of Finns, you know, and some of our team is still living there. So partly our team is still in Finland. So
this really does come down to, like, you know, wild crafting. I mean, you're wild harvesting these. Obviously, you can't grow. Maybe you can. Can you grow a chaga mushroom in an unnatural environment, or do you need to pretty much always be out in the woods harvesting them?
So it depends on the mushrooms. For example, chaga, you really have to kind of wildcraft it. There's some people that have been working on the natural cultivation of it without much success. Some success, but not much. Whereas other mushrooms like shiitake have been farmed naturally for a long, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of years. It means that you take essentially the spores or the seeds of the mushroom into a dying tree. So, especially the Japanese have innovated this system for a long time. So you can farm them in a natural way. Unfortunately, in the last 10, 20 years, there's an increasing amount of lab-grown mushrooms that are grown in not so natural substrains, but you can mostly wildcraft them, but you can also grow them naturally in tree logs, which is essentially kind of like greenhouse farming using trees. So it's kind of a funky but natural way of growing them.
Got it. So of the mushrooms that are in your products, like, what are, like, you know, I know a couple of them, but let's share them with our folks. So, you know, there are about 3 or 4 real go-to mushrooms that you guys use. And can we talk about, you know, maybe the 1 or 2 of those in depth, and just kind of, not only like, you know, its medicinal value, but maybe its history, you know, how it's been used by human beings through time, and also what they can do to find it. You know, obviously Four Sigmatic is an amazing resource, but, you know, a lot of these things can be found in nature as well. So, I mean, I just love to delve into that.
Most of them actually grow in North America. So depending where you're living, I mean, you have international viewers as well. So it depends on where you live. A lot of these can be found. So what I see a lot is when I start to talk about fungi, people start to think about either psychedelics or your portobello mushroom, and they get confused. And then when they start to learn about these medicinal mushrooms, they're like, first they're excited, but then they're like, whoa, it's too much of information. So it's really good to understand that you do not need to know 1.5 million different types of fungi. Nobody does. Same way as when you start to learn about the shamans in Amazon, you don't need to learn as much as they know. Just start with like few basics. And what are those in the mushroom world? I would say, when in doubt, start with Rishi mushroom. So it's Reishi, Japanese name. It's the queen of all mushrooms. It's probably the most studied mushrooms. It's often known as the mushroom of immortality. It's in the original traditional Chinese medicine encyclopedia of plants. It was touted as the most healing food in the world. So even more healing than ginseng, for example. So it's the kind of the ground jewel of mushrooms. And what it helps is, like other mushrooms, it helps with the immune system. So they're immunomodulators. Almost all of these tree mushrooms modulate your immune system. So what does it mean? It helps you when you have a flu, cough, or a passive immune system. And passive immune system also happens when you have a cancer, when your immune system is just not weak. It's too weak to fight pathogens. So mushrooms help with that, which stimulates it. But also more and more people have a hyperactive immune response, which is almost the opposite of cancer, is when your natural killer cells and other security officers in your body are attacking your healthy cells. This is arthritis, MS disease, Crohn's disease. And you guys covered a lot of this in your documentary as well.
Mm-hmm.
Increasingly common. So mushrooms are modulators. So they also calm you down if you're there. So it knows if you need a boost or a calm. And Rishi does that as well. But Rishi also helps probably break down stress, lower cortisol, protect your liver in nighttime, possibly antihistaminic. So research shows it has antihistaminic properties. So people have strong allergic reactions. I would say is that it's one of the more grounding and calming mushrooms. If you're just generally, if you have a lot of stress or you're not sleeping well, or a lot of allergic reactions, I would look into Rishi. So that's the first one. The king is called Chaga, grows in Siberia and Canada predominantly. Colder climates in the birch tree. Great for inflammation. Originally used in the kind of the 16th century, 17th century in Russia by the Tsars for like digestive issues and cancer. There's a long history of cancer use with chaga. And all of these mushrooms actually are pretty much promoted by top cancer hospitals. But chaga, especially like digestive health, colon, inflammation, and skin. It's the highest in sources of melanin, the pigment that our skin produces. So if you have skin-related issues, it's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has this, especially this antioxidant superoxide dismutase, which is particularly powerful for inflammation and gut healing issues. So I would look into that. And then I would say third is lion's mane. It's a more specific one. It was used for more like Parkinson and Alzheimer originally, but works for everybody for brain health, nervous system. So if you want like memory and power in a very safe way, sometimes I'll call these smart drugs or nootropics. Lion's mane is a very safe option for those. So maybe that's the three special ones. And I'll just list the other ones that you might see is maitake, shiitake, cordyceps, turkey tail, tremella, enoki, oyster. Those are all great ones. But if you just want to start with the basics, it's reishi, chaga, and lion's mane.
And like you said, I mean, this is if you live in the States, which a lot of our viewers do, but a lot of them live elsewhere. But if you live in the northern hemisphere, a lot of these mushrooms are pretty easy to find, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I chose these three is you should find all of these pretty easily in the United States. So chaga is limited to where birch grows, so you can get Midwest, Minnesota, Maine, Vermont, actually North Carolina. If you're higher in the mountains, you might find birch. So that's where you can get it. Don't pick it from like maple or ash. Focus on the ones that grow on birch. Rishi grows on both coasts. There's slightly different varieties probably. The west coast is called Ganoderma oregonese and the east coast Ganoderma chukai. The east coast is a little bit healthier, maybe better for us, but their growth both great. Grows on hemlocks predominantly. Can also grow on other trees. And then lion's mane, especially in the northeast, you can find it pretty widely. If you're lucky, also in the Pacific Northwest. So generally like the colder climates and older forests. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb. Another one that you find probably everywhere in the country is called turkey tail. So you want to go look for that. It's very easy to recognize. And the tree mushrooms are not poisonous. So generally all the poisonous mushrooms grow on ground. So it's also safer to forage these, but always start with somebody who knows or with a book or a local mycology association. So
yeah, that was something that I found really intriguing about tree mushrooms to begin with is, so a lot of times you hear about people wild harvesting mushrooms and like the first thought is like, that's dangerous. You can not necessarily, I mean, I've seen tons of studies and tons of reports from different folks in the natural health world that say, hey, I mean, like most mushrooms are relatively safe. Yeah, you have to get very unlucky and make some bad decisions if you want to really hurt yourself with mushrooms, but let's just say for the general health, in the interest of general health, like that you shouldn't just go and start picking mushrooms off the forest floor without knowing what you're doing. But tree mushrooms, something that's intriguing about them to me is that they seem to all be relatively safe. So you can't make a mortal, or a fatal mistake while you're picking them out. Is that true? Or are there
it is true. So there's actually like maybe a half a dozen actually poisonous mushrooms that you should recognize. It's no different from berries. But at the same time, if you're not familiar, don't pick up ground mushrooms because those are those 6, maybe 12, poisonous mushrooms out there. So start with somebody who is an expert forager or somebody who's, like I said, a local mycology association. Usually they are in every city and they cost maybe like, $20 to join. So it's not a financial issue to anybody. So that's great. But the tree mushrooms are safe. even the ones that are less medicinal are not toxic. So that's a great way to start. And it's also good to understand that what plants take is that plants take the healing power of the soil and the sun, essentially minerals, using the sun, photosynthesis, create these healing properties. Amazing. What these mushrooms do, actually, they take the healing power of the trees. So same way as the ideal diet for humans is like eating soil, but we can't eat soil, so that's why we eat plants. What should also be trees. So a lot of these trees have these compounds that are extremely healing from these holy trees. So a lot of indigenous cultures consider trees to be holy. So using the power of pine or using the power of birch, which we consider sacred, and using that, but because we cannot ingest them, in some cases we can, like in the Amazon, Palo d'Arco and other barks that we can use, but there's a lot of trees we cannot utilize. So the mushrooms help us assimilate some of the compounds from those trees.
It's funny, you mentioned Palo d'Arco. When I get a cold here in the States, there's two things I do. I start boiling a Reishi mushroom. When I start getting up, but I know that I know it's time for me to kick my body into gear.
Yeah.
Usually, and I also start boiling Palo d'Arco. Like those two together are like my two, and it's like my people are always surprised at how fast I get better, because I do garlic and more conventional folk things, like folk remedies like that too when I get sick. But Palo d'Arco, Rishi, it's like
Those are the bomb. They're also very bitter. So if you're at home and you want to try this, try adding a little bit of fats with it. Maybe try almond milk or coconut oil or something to break down, or vanilla, or maybe try a non-sugar sweetener, let's say monk fruit or stevia or something to break down. Because if you're not used to it, Palo d'Arco Rishi tea is pretty bitter.
Yeah.
But you should learn how to enjoy the bitters, especially when you're sick. Bitters are the more bitter, the better.
Yeah.
So it's a great remedy.
I got that with when I first started drinking Rishi tea. It wasn't really to get rid of something. It was more because one of my mentors lives in the Rockies, and he always just kind of he always spoke about the power of Rishi, and how just drinking a little bit of Rishi tea every day, for a long period of time, can have a very spiritual. It can have a very substantial effect on your awareness and your consciousness over the course of a month or two. And I remember being like, really? Like, it's just a tree mushroom. It's like there's no psychedelic effect. And I boiled Rishi, and I had Rishi on my stove for a few months straight. And it's pretty powerful. Like, I mean, they're actually, it's not like you're going to go into la la land, but like you definitely have, there's a definite feeling, a definite shift in your consciousness when you're drinking Rishi tea on a regular basis. That's really beneficial.
Absolutely. And the Western people would quote the reasons because of the stress reduction. As we have less stress, we're more focused, more in ourselves. The Chinese, they have a funny thing they call these treasures. So in their sacred Taoist herbalism, you call the Jing, the Qi, and the Shen. And so Jing is like the candle wax of our body. Qi is the flame and the blood circulation that we go through. And Shen is the kind of the light that we put out the room, our consciousness and I guess our spiritual thing. And Qi focuses mostly on the Shen. So it's really fascinating that focuses on the consciousness. But from a scientific point of view, it really helps you calm down. And it's a tonic thing. Again, different indigenous cultures call these things different, but it's something that you can both prevents and cures, whereas certain herbs only cure and certain things more only prevent. So for example, garlic you couldn't take every day. You would probably get sick at one point, whereas Rishi is a great example of a thing that you can take on a daily basis.
Very cool. Something I was reading a bunch about Chaga, and it was just interesting to see some of the language on Chaga. Like, it's technically like it's a parasitic mushroom. Like it kind of can be found on the wounds of living trees a lot. And it feels like it's almost, I don't want to say it's almost like I guess it almost feels like a cancerous growth in a way, like on a tree. And I don't know if that's misspeaking, misrepresenting what it is. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's interesting to me that it isn't just that like the chaga exists harmoniously with this birch tree. A lot of times they show up on trees that are unhealthy, right? And it's they start decomposing the tree while it's alive, and then continue to decompose it once it's toppled over. Is that accurate? And what do you think that means for the whole, in about the nature of the plant and what that, just, I guess on like an existential level, what does that mean? You know?
So I'll start with the more scientific side, I know, and with more of the existential and the,
Yeah.
some would call woo-woo side of things.
Yeah.
So what most of these tree mushrooms do is they're actually breaking down matter and creating topsoil. Mushrooms in general help create soil. So mushrooms were the first thing apparently to come from the sea to the dry land, and they, for about 1.3 billion years ago, and they, for 600 million years, they ate rocks to build topsoil. So what mushrooms do is they break down inorganic and organic matter into other particles. So what they do is they detoxify the forest and they clean the forest, which is going to be quite an assumption also for our health, what it does. So it helps heal. So what chaga is a little bit different from the others is most of these others are more perennial or annual, and this is more perennial. So a lot of the other tree mushrooms grow on dead trees. And chaga is one of the ones that comes on a living tree. Actually, at that point, the tree is already a little bit old and sick. So it's already kind of sick and dying. And chaga comes and gives it more life. But if you take the whole chaga out, the tree is going to die pretty much immediately because it becomes reliable on chaga.
Got it.
You can harvest half of it and it's going to stay, so it's going to regrow. But if you take the full piece of chaga, then it's probably going to kill the tree. But the tree is already going to die. It's not like it happens. It was already on its way, and just gives it more lifespan. But what is interesting, the fact is the detoxifying aspect and also the kind of synergistic function it has with plants and trees. So I think that's a metaphor for the existential part. Also know that the mycelium, which is the kind of the roots of mushrooms, communicate with all plants underground. So wherever you walk, you're walking on top of mycelial network, and they're communicating with other mycelial networks and trees and plants. So just something to think about is also from the information of the planet and the earth. The mushrooms connect a lot of that information.
Is there a reason why you advocate for the drinking of mushrooms as opposed to like the consumption of a tablet or, you know, another form of taking this medicine into your body or this, you know?
Yeah, there's 3 reasons. One is that it's the most ancient way. So these mushrooms were originally drank as a tea-like beverage or as a soup. And this comes down to extraction. So when you have these tree mushrooms, they look like kind of like bark of the tree. So you have to like think of like making bone broth. So you extract the goodies from the bone broth into the liquid. Something similar happens with these tree mushrooms. So that's how they were ancient way of consuming them. So that's one reason. The second reason is that we believe, which we can't scientifically prove, but we believe is that once you taste it, your body gets ready for it. So that's really important factor. And that's why I think like your mentor and people, even on your documentaries, teaching people to enjoy these drinks like Paul Darko on a constant basis, teach your body to also appreciate those factors, and also becomes your body to be more, good at recognizing things that are healthy for us and bad for us.
Yeah.
Teaching our body for that. Again, I can't prove it, but that's what we believe. And then third is just consistency. Like people are like, the most important thing about any herbalistic system is that compliance is king. Like if you don't take it, it doesn't help you. So compliance is everything. And a lot of people are capsuled out. They're taking so many capsules already and it doesn't feel natural for them. So if they can drink or consume it in a smoothie or some other way of consuming these products, usually people have better luck in making it a habit and a ritual. So you were talking about it yourself on drinking the chaga and just having it as a habit. So I think that's a great one. This is our belief and we could be wrong, but this is how we think about it.
You know, I at first, like you said, the bitterness was offensive at first. When I started drinking the Rishi, specifically, I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this every day. But then after like day 2, day 3, I started like really enjoying like that bitterness. And I think it's something that I've heard like, Daniel Vitalis talk about it. And it's just this idea of sort of the primal palate. It's like, getting back into that the way that our palate used to be. It's sort of been dumbed down with all the sweet, salty, savory, easy flavors to kind of detect. But what about these more complex flavors, things that we don't really expose ourselves to much anymore? There's something really enjoyable about that bitterness once you begin to work with it, for sure.
Absolutely. I learned this as a kid through dandelions. So every spring, they would come as a dandelion and I would start nibbling on it. And the first couple of days I didn't like it, but after probably day 3 or 4, I started to crave it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating. But I mean, I understand that not everybody's there. So that's why, for example, my company makes like mushroom hot chocolate, mushroom coffee, other ways how there's familiar bitter flavors of chocolate and coffee, which are also bitter and great. That's why cacao is such a sacred plant as well. And coffee, when used right, it can be also very good for you, emphasizing when used right.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so, um, so that's why we just use those as a kind of a delivery method for people who are not yet familiar. So, for example, using our mushroom hot cocoa is a kind of a great way of getting familiar with some of those flavors and then gradually working from there.
Yeah. I mean, I was just saying to you before we started this talk, I'm drinking one of your delicious brews right now. It's the mushroom coffee, the mushroom and green the chaga green coffee mix. It's now what I drink every morning. It's like part of my regimen. I mean, it has a little bit of the bitterness that I love, from the Rishi, but it's also, you've combined it with such like mastery, like with other flavors, that it's just like it almost tastes like its own delicious breakfast brew, which is amazing.
And that one has also a mushroom called maitake, which is one of my favorite culinary, but also medicinal mushrooms. And just a funny story on the name of maitake, which means it's Japanese and means the dancing mushroom. It was used by, for example, the samurais who were otherwise very stoic and composed people. But when they found this mushroom growing in the forest, they would start dancing out of joy. So,
What?
so some of these, I love these ancient stories.
Yeah.
For whatever they're worth, they're amazing because it tells like people valued before there was money, something else provided value, and it was often from nature. So I love that.
So how do people who are listening to this, I'm sure there are many people from our audience that are excited about trying some of this. I mean, what can we do for them? I mean, where do they go, and what's the best way to engage with you guys?
Well, I mean, look, just give mushrooms a chance in any form or the other. Like, go to your local farmers market, talk to a mycology association. But if you want to check out some of the stuff we do, we have a free mushroom academy, and we've tried to make these products that are easier to use. So maybe using those products is the easiest way, because then you start to do something concretely. It's not just words and knowledge, but it's action. I love action. So for example, we have this cool mushroom starter kit that has mushroom coffee, a mushroom hot chocolate, and a mushroom elixir. So something for everybody. It's like an easy way to start. So maybe getting that or something. But I would say that some of the mushrooms we mentioned here is chaga and Rishi. Those are great ways to start, because that's the king and the queen of mushrooms. So having products that chaga and Rishi, and those are great options.
Cool. So what we'll do, you and I will probably talk after this and figure out something to give to these folks that are interested. I know that this is changing my life, and it's something that I've been really meaning to talk more about with the sacred science community, is like just the power of medicinal mushrooms, specifically tree mushrooms. And now, am I saying this right when I say that most tree mushrooms are polypores, and most of what you're working with are polypores?
Yeah. So, so I'd say medicinal mushrooms is the main category. And then under that, almost all medicinal mushrooms are tree mushrooms. Almost
Mm-hmm.
all. Not
Mm-hmm.
all. And almost all tree mushrooms are polypores. So polypores are it's a category. Now we're getting into the mycology, but it's the category of mushrooms. But if you're listening to this and you're like, what's going on? Like, you don't have to worry about the polypore yet. It's good to know that mushrooms also grow on trees, and also that mushrooms have these scientifically proven health benefits, and they're used both by indigenous cultures and the modern science. So that's what you need to know. But yes, you're right. Most tree mushrooms are also polypores.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of what we talk about in the sacred sciences relating to ethnobotany, but ethnomycology is really interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing until like maybe a month ago when you and I first talked. I'm like, I've started doing a lot more research. I'm like, wait a second, ethnomycology, this is really interesting. We really need to explore this. You and I should probably have another call like this where we just dive right into. And ethnomycology is basically the usage of mushrooms, traditional uses of mushrooms by different cultures from around the world. I mean, this is big stuff. This is big stuff.
Every indigenous culture would have utilized them. And sometimes they just call them plants as well, because for them, it just means different than to us. Everything is a plant, it's like plant medicine or something like that. And one thing for the Amazon is that a couple of years ago, they found on the Ecuadorian side mushrooms growing that can eat plastic. So
I saw that.
we've had plastic for, about 120 years. And so far it has not decomposed in nature. It might in, 1,000 years or something, it might start breaking down, but we don't know yet. So
Yeah.
I mentioned before that mushrooms like to get these inorganic matters and break them into organic matters. Even horrible chemical warfare weapons and other things like that, it just likes to eat it, and radiation. So there's this mushroom that can break it down. So from an environmental point of view, there's a lot of promise about use of these mushrooms. But obviously the easiest way to start experimenting with them is just for your own health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really need to have another conversation and really delve into ethnomycology and a lot of other things too. I mean, this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, and it's an honor to be here with you today for sure.
Anytime. Yeah. And also for your community is like, just share your own experiences around mushrooms in your Facebook group and page, and just like, let's learn from each other. Cause like, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this this is not their first time of hearing about mushrooms, and they've have experience. So just share it with the community, and so we can learn from each other.
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.